I'd like to welcome everyone to the October 30th, 2018 hearings before the Baltimore Municipal and Zoning Appeals Board. Before we get started, we have a few preliminary items. Please turn off all cell phones, or at least turn them to vibrate. And also, if you need to have a conversation, we would ask that you take that conversation out in the hallway. The reason being that cell phones and conversations are not only disruptive to the proceedings here, they interfere with the recordation of our proceedings here today. We've got one postponement that I'm going to announce, and that is case 2018-347, 3713 Eastern Avenue. No one here has signed in, so I don't believe we need to give anybody notice, but that case has been postponed. We're going to call cases generally as they appear on the docket. When we call your case, the appellant will stand to my left, and any opposition will stand to my right. The appellant will present his or her case, and then we will hear from the opposition, and then we will give the appellant the opportunity to sum up his or her position. That will end the hearing, and we will not have a lot back and forth after that hearing is ended. We will vote on the appeals that are heard today at the end of the docket. And if you wish to hang around and listen to our deliberations and hear the decision, you certainly may, but otherwise you can call our office tomorrow and get our decision. The phone number is 410-396-4301. And I'll read that again, 410-396-4301. Please do not build in Baltimore without the proper permits. You'll get a written decision from us in approximately 2 to 3 weeks. What I'd like to do is first address cases for which opposition is signed in. We have found that sometimes the differences that people have in a particular project can sometimes be resolved if the people just talk it through a little bit, and we want to give everyone the opportunity to do that. So, and I do note that while we encourage people to talk, that does not, an agreement between the parties does not influence how we will rule on the case. So I'm going to call, there's a couple cases for which opposition is signed in. I'm going to just stand up when I call your case number. The first case is 2018-252, 2280 Druid Park Drive. Ms. Burgunder. Have you all had the opportunity to talk? Would you like to talk some more? Okay, we can't make you talk.
Okay. Add 350 to the opposition list.
350? Okay. Next case, 2018-350, 1433 Loman Street. You going out to talk, Ms. Tice? Yes. Okay. And next case that we have opposition signed in is 2018-359, 2402 Lakeview Avenue. Have the parties had the chance to talk?
No, sir.
Would you like to talk?
I don't think the appellant is here.
The appellant?
I don't think so.
All right, we will call that case in turn then. Okay, next we're going to move on and call cases for which the board has determined we have sufficient information to approve the appeal. I'm going to call all of these at once, and I ask you to line up to my left in the order that I called your case. The first case is 2018-337, 333 North Charles Street, Jenny Hope. Next is 2018-345, 3505 Clark's Lane, Orrin Orbach. Next is, they just stand right there. Next is 2018-346, 800 West Northern Parkway. Next case, 2018-349, 3100 to 3102 Pressman Street, Tavon Johnson. Next, 2018-358, 1530 Bolton Street, Andre Nizarsi, and I may not be pronouncing that correctly. Thank you. And the last case on the consent is 2018-363, 3509 Chestnut Avenue. Mr. Prettle. Yeah, I didn't have that, okay. All right, got one additional case, 2018-355, 904 through 928 East North Avenue. Roberta's House, Inc. Okay. All right, let's get everybody sworn in.
Now raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. First case, 2018-337, 333 North Charles Street, Jenny Hope, who is not here. Next is 2018-345, 3505 Clark's Lane. Step up to the mic, please. State your name for the record.
Owen Orbach.
Mr. Orbach, we have this to enclose decks and balconies. Is that correct?
Yes, I was supposed also to add, I think we did it, and to add that we're going to extend the lobby and add two additional balconies.
Do we have that? Mr. Baumgartner?
We can evaluate, those additions wouldn't change what's before the board today, but we'll evaluate those. Do we have those plans?
I have it, yes.
But have you submitted those prior to right now?
Yes.
Okay. We can review those plans to make sure
Okay.
that they do not increase any degree of variance that'll be required for the current application.
Okay. Do we have any staff reports?
Martin French for the Department of Planning. Planning Department has no comment on this application. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Orbach, is there anything you'd like to add?
That's it.
Great. We have, the board having reviewed your case, we have sufficient information to approve your case. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, 2018-346, 800 West Northern Parkway.
Sir, my name is Ming Chu.
Chu, and we have this to construct 6-foot-high fence in portions of front and street corner side yards. Is that correct?
The 6 foot just on the front.
Just the front?
Yes.
Okay, we will modify. Any staff reports?
Planning Department has no comment on this application. Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, everything's been written.
Great. Zoning Board, having reviewed your appeal, we have sufficient information to approve your appeal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is 2018-349, 3100 to 3102 Pressman Street. Could you state your name for the record, please?
My name is Clifton Addison. I'm standing in for Mr. Johnson.
Okay. And we have this to use premises as office space?
Yes, sir.
Great. Any staff reports?
The Planning Department has reviewed this application and recommends approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything you'd like to add?
Nothing to add, sir.
Okay. Zoning Board, having reviewed your appeal, we have sufficient information to approve your appeal.
Thank you.
Very much. Next, I'm gonna try to bring this back to order because we missed one. 2018-355, 904 through 928 East North Avenue. How are you? Can you state your name, please?
Daniel McCarthy?
Mr. McCarthy, and you're representing Roberta's House, Inc., is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we have this to consolidate 904 through 928 East North Avenues and to construct cultural facility, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do we have any staff reports?
Thank you. Planning Department has reviewed this application and recommends approval of this particular property, subject to the condition that all improvements to the consolidated property are completed in accordance with plans and drawings approved by the Department of Planning. The reason being this property is located in the East Baltimore Midway Urban Renewal Plan area. Thank you.
Thank you. And are those conditions acceptable to you?
Yes, sir.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, sir.
Zoning Board, having reviewed your appeal, we have sufficient information to approve your appeal. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may, Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
This was originally filed as a cultural center, is that correct?
Was initially, that was the indication we got from the zoning office, and then I think in consultation between the BMZA board, planning, and Mr. Veal's office, they changed the
And now
direction.
it's to request the use of the property as a
Community.
community center, correct?
Yes, sir.
So that's been modified for the community center?
Mhm.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, that was, after we had posted the property, they came back and asked us to amend the sign, which we did.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next case, 2018-358, 1530 Bolton Street.
Andrew Niazi with homeowner Rachel Scott.
Great, thank you. And we have this to construct one-story detached rear one-car garage, is that correct?
Correct.
Great. Any staff reports?
Thank you. Planning Department has reviewed this application and recommends approval of the application, subject to the condition that the garage and any related landscaping be completed in accordance with the authorization to proceed issued by the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation, this being because this property is located in the Bolton Hill Historic District.
Great, thank you. And is that condition acceptable to you?
It is.
Great. Anything you'd like to add?
Nope.
Zoning Board, having reviewed your appeal, we have sufficient information to approve your appeal. Thank you very much. And finally, 3509, 2018-363, 3509 Chestnut Avenue.
Good afternoon.
State your name for the record, please.
Nate Prettle.
Thank you very much. And we have this to raise portion of rear garage and construct two-story rear addition, correct?
That's correct.
Great. Any staff reports?
Planning Department has no comment on this application. Thank you.
Anything you'd like to add?
Just that it met with the community association and the neighbors and had no objections to the plans.
Great. The zoning board, having reviewed your appeal, we have sufficient information to approve your
Thank you
appeal.
very much.
Thank you. All right, next we're going to move to the remaining cases on our docket, and as I said, we'll generally call these in order that they appear on the docket. First case is 2018-233, 2846 Parkwood Avenue. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Are you the appellant?
I'm standing in for Jason Tate.
Okay.
Name, please spell it.
Maria Thomas.
And let's get you sworn in.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And we have this to use as 3 dwelling units, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you tell us a little bit about the project and especially the current status of the property, whether it's vacant or not, and if it is vacant, how long it has been vacant?
So we purchased the property recently, and there were tenants. It's already split into 3 different apartments. So we were actually surprised when we were told it wasn't zoned for 3 families. We've gone through a couple of evictions, and I think there's 1 person there left.
Okay. Mr. Baumgartner, what do we have on our records for prior usage? And while he's looking, do you have a multiple dwelling license for the property?
Yes. And we also have a, I think we tried to get one. I can call Jason. But we have a letter here from the Municipal Zoning Appeals Board that says there's no objection to this application. Is that relevant?
That looks like a planning report.
I'm not sure what it is.
Let me see this. That's Department of Planning. We'll get that back to you.
Oh, okay.
And we're going to ask planning to weigh in a second.
So, Mr. Chairman, the last record we have for this property from the city's parcel sheet shows the property as a single-family dwelling. There's no indication that a permit was issued for multifamily, but this only goes back through the electronic records, which does not go back that far. But that's the last that we have.
All right, so why don't you describe the property to us? Are there separate meters for each unit?
No, but there are separate entrances to each level. And we had renters in there that we had to evict, living separately, different families. So, and we purchased it as a multi-unit dwelling.
Yes, it's unfortunate. I mean, we hear this a lot, that people buy things as multiple units and they're not licensed to be multiple units. And when did you buy this property?
I think it was auctioned maybe 3 months ago. I'd have to call Jason to find out.
Okay.
It was
and
through an auction.
you bought it 3 months ago at an auction, and there were 3 families in there when you
There were
bought?
2 families.
Two
And we
families.
went through evictions and everything.
Mr. Chairman, it looks like there were vacant house notices issued on December of 2011, October of 2016, and February of 2017.
Okay. Okay. Anything else you'd like to add?
No. just
And
a-
I neglected to ask if there's any staff reports, so I'll do that now.
Thank you. Planning Department reviewed this application. Planning Department also noted, as Mr. Baumgartner has noted, that the electronic record system for the city shows this as a single-family dwelling. However, there is a record in the office downstairs from us that shows a certificate of occupancy for use of the property as 3 dwelling units was issued on January 26th of 1966. So the conclusion of the department is that this property was lawfully used as 3 dwelling units. However, it became a vacant property, and under the terms of the previous zoning code, its status under the zoning code reverted to that of a single-family dwelling, which is probably why the electronic system is now showing it as a single-family dwelling. However, the department has no objection to the application if the property was last authorized for multifamily use, and therein lies the question to be resolved.
Okay. All right, any questions from the board? Great, anything else?
What does he mean when he says that? But how did we move forward? How do we know if it was authorized? Are we taking the 1966 authorization as?
Well, that's evidence that we're going to consider.
So essentially, and this is for the future as well, when this issue comes up, it will be on the applicant to essentially dig into the property history to find the permits, whether they're in the paper system or otherwise, to show a lawful multifamily use on this property. So that would be up to you or any other applicant.
Okay,
Okay?
yeah,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
They're back?
So do I get
Okay.
that sheet back?
She's asking for the planning report back. I think it's on bills.
Do I just call to find out what's the next
Yeah,
step?
you can call tomorrow. Right, I'm going to call a consent case. I understand the appellant has just shown up, 2018-337, 333 North Charles Street. Hi, how are you?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Can you state your name, please?
Jenny Hope. I'm
Okay.
acting president of the Women's Industrial Exchange of Baltimore City.
Okay, and we have this to use first floor front as commercial kitchen, is that correct?
The first floor kitchen as a.
Right,
as
and let
a-
me, again, we're sort of out of order here. Let me get you sworn in.
Raise
Oh,
your
I'm
right hand.
sorry.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, so to use first floor front as commercial kitchen,
Well, it's actually the first floor kitchen. The
Kitchen.
front is actually a retail space.
Okay.
But it's on the first floor.
okay,
And
Okay.
there's an existing kitchen. It was a restaurant. More than a year ago, they left. And so we were told that we had to come to make sure that it could be used as a commissary.
okay. Any staff reports?
Planning Department has reviewed this application and is recommending approval of the application. Thank you.
Anything you'd like to add?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Zoning Board, having reviewed your appeal, we have sufficient information to approve your appeal. Thank you
Great.
very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, next case, 2018-252, 2280 Druid Park Drive. Okay, let's get everybody sworn in, who's going to provide testimony.
Raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
And we have this to use as 2 dwelling units, is that correct?
Yes, this is actually, it's not a conversion in the traditional sense, it's a grandfathered 2-unit building.
Okay. Why don't you tell us about it?
Okay.
Well, let me ask for staff, I keep forgetting to ask for staff reports
okay.
today. Are there any staff reports?
Yes, the Planning Department has reviewed this application. The electronic record, as I'm sure will be stated, shows this as a semi-detached, single-family dwelling, which is a permitted use. However, the department is unable to determine if there was ever a permit issued for multifamily use of this property. And for that reason, the department recommends disapproval of the application because the board is not authorized to approve conversion of a single-family dwelling to a multifamily dwelling in the R6 zoning district where this property is located. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
So if I may, just in summary and a bit in the way of a proffer, with me is the property owner, Mr. Altskown is here, he's the property owner, and also with me is Neil Curtis, who is with the Architecture Office of Adam Carballo. He's a graduate, bachelor's and master's from Oregon State in architecture, but not yet a licensed architect. He'll take his test soon, so we're going to wish him good luck on that. So if I could just by way of a proffer and to sort of summarize a little bit as to where we believe that the board should rule. This is not a conversion. We're not looking under 9701 to convert this property from 1 dwelling unit to 2. We are looking to have this board approve a grandfathered use of the property under 18-201C, which is for non-conforming, or it used to be called non-complying structures. So structures that are too big to fit on the lot, not too much lot coverage, that kind of thing. And so it's non-conforming, or in the old zoning code, non-complying structure. There is no sunset provision on non-conforming or non-complying structures under 18-402. They may be continued. They can't be expanded, which we're not asking to do, but they may be continued as such. If I could share with the board, I don't know if I have enough total copies, but I have some. Share that with these folks here, and I have a couple extra packets I didn't bring. Why I don't have more packets? I have another one. So if you look at, as far as historically, and we did some digging into the property to meet the requirements for the request that we're making, the property at issue is in red. There's a red arrow and a box to it. It's 2280 Druid Park Drive. And there is, the zoning card, which I'll provide to the board, is blank. There's nothing actually on the zoning cards. There is no history for this property. So we thought it would be worthwhile to look into the properties that are neighboring to this property. And if you see, there is a grouping of 10 semi-detached houses, 5 groups of 2 each. And those are all buildings that are longer than the properties that are to the right. So if you look at the properties to the right, those are all little, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 little properties that are much shorter in depth. So all of the properties, we just looked at the properties that are similarly constructed. They were all built in around 1920, 1921. And we looked and we to see if there was zoning cards for any of the properties in the neighborhood and if there were registrations for multifamily dwelling licenses for any of those other properties. And so the property that is immediately to our left is 2282. There is no zoning card for that property. The property immediately to our right is 2278 Druid Park. And there's actually there was on the zoning card, and I'll share with you the zoning card from 1957. There was a certificate of occupancy filed for 2 families. There was a permit issued for 2 families. There were actually 2 vacant house notices in 1984 and 1998, so 14 years apart. And that the current use with the Department of Housing and Community Development, and there's a multifamily license for that property as 2 dwelling units. The next property has no zoning card. It's presently used as 1 dwelling unit. The next property is 2274. There's also a zoning card was issued in 1955 for 2 families. It's presently being used as 1 dwelling unit, but in the 1950s, it was 2 dwelling units. The next property has no zoning card, so we don't know the history for that property. The next property has no zoning card. Again, we don't know the history. The next property, the police survey with no date on it on the zoning card, was 2 dwelling units. The next property has a 1962 certificate of occupancy for 2 dwelling units. And the last property in that block grouping is 2264 Druid Park Drive. And the zoning card from 1954 says 2 apartments. 1957 actually says 3 apartments. 62, 3 dwelling units. And then 2003, a certificate of occupancy was for 2 dwelling units. And somehow right now it's 3 dwelling units. I'm not sure, that doesn't actually make sense. But the point is that of the properties that have zoning cards dating back to the 1950s, all 5 that have zoning cards show a 2 dwelling unit use. As well, we trace back the history of the zoning code just so that everybody could understand. And this is a bit of a history lesson, maybe not entirely necessary, but maybe interesting to some people, at least interesting to me, maybe to Mr. Cunningham. So in the 1920s, so after the Baltimore fire of 1904, that's when zoning codes came into effect because the government thought, hey, we don't want places burning down with people living, and then maybe we shouldn't have factories right next to houses. And that's how zoning codes came about here in Baltimore and elsewhere in the country. And in the 1920s, which was the first real zoning code for Baltimore City, the city was divided into effectively 2 districts, residential districts and non-residential districts. This property, we did a blow up from the 1940. It was in what's called a D40, which was a density that was determined based on the number of people who lived in an acre of property. It was a very odd way to do it. You could have a house with 8 families living in it, as long as it didn't overcome the density for the neighbors. So to have a family with a house with 8 in it, you'd have to have lots of single-family houses to make sure the acreage. You can see why that wouldn't make any sense in this day and age. And then the city went from there to a map that shows the residential versus non-residential. So the white areas on this map are the residential areas. And at this point in time, in the 20s through 1971, there was no distinguishing in the zoning code, and we have copies of the zoning code, between single-family houses and multifamily houses. So as long as you were not more than 2 units, if you were 3 or more, you would be considered multifamily, but there wasn't any distinguishing it in the zoning code. So here is a copy, it's in your packet, of the 1928 zoning code, a little inartfully photographed, but the term dwelling included apartment houses in the 1920s. Then you get to the 1950s, and again, there's no distinguishing between the different types of dwelling units. So that's why there's a paucity of records with regard to anything happening before the 1950s, is because you didn't really need to, in Baltimore City, come before the zoning board to get approval to convert your house to 2 units. And then it's not until 1971 that you get to the point where the city says, wait a second, we should distinguish between. So that's the first comprehensive zoning code for Baltimore City, was in 1971. And so things that were in existence prior to 1971, which is what we argue this property is, dating back to the 1950s, were effectively grandfathered at that point as non-complying under the old zoning code, non-conforming under the current zoning code. Also in your packet are copies of all the zoning codes that I referred to and the properties, and you'll see that all of the neighboring properties that were similarly built and constructed in the 1920 to 1921, of the ones that have zoning cards, the ones that have zoning cards all show 2-family or more. Actually, there was a couple with 3. Also in your zoning packet are the multifamily registrations for the properties that had the zoning cards that are still to this day used as more than 1 dwelling unit. So all of the ones on the block, save 1 that was renovated, I think in 2015, all have multifamily licenses. So The point of all that is that the property, we believe, is grandfathered. We believe that there is sufficient evidence to show that, not for the zoning card for this property, but in the fact that all of the other properties that have notations from the 1950s where the police survey went, they literally went door to door. If someone wasn't home at this property, it wouldn't be put down on the zoning card. So that's what we believe, is all of those properties were similarly constructed and similarly used. I have also brought with me and submitted to the board, in addition to my letter or report from Adam Carballo Architecture. Mr. Curtis is here to address some aspects of that report. But I think that the important aspects of it is that there are two separate entrances, and I can let him explain if the board would like that explanation. So Mr. Curtis, if you could, you've had an opportunity, first of all, you work at Adam Carballo Architecture, yes?
Yes.
And you are a graduate, bachelor's, I'm sorry, Neil Curtis. And Mr. Curtis, you're a bachelor's and a graduate, a master's degree in architecture from Morgan State?
Correct.
But not yet licensed as an architect? Okay, soon?
Yes.
Okay. And you've had the opportunity to review this property and to understand its architectural aspects?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell us a little bit about how the property is constructed?
Sure. When you come through the main entrance, there's a common hallway that separates the two properties. The two units. There are two entry doors. Both of them are trimmed out with trim that looks like it would be from the 50s, and it's natural condition. Inspecting the two units, the kitchens are stacked. Well, there are two kitchens in the building. They're stacked.
And explain what that means.
One over top of the other, so that they aren't haphazardly placed through the building. So it looked like it was done intentionally when they were first built. The appliances that were there when we inspected looked to be original from the 50s era. Let's see. The placement of the bedrooms being off of the front of the building, there are no separate entrances into that room, leading us to believe that there was never an entrance there, and they were planned to be there. The kitchens don't look like they were there haphazardly, or they weren't infilling, which would be a bedroom, which you would think would be in a two-dwelling unit on the second floor. There are no closets in that area. The design of them and the way they are laid out doesn't lend itself to any modern appliances at all.
So like no space for minimal cabinets, minimal countertop,
Correct.
No space for dishwasher?
Correct.
Okay. And then are there other aspects of the architecture that would lead you to conclude that the properties were built such a way and existed since the 1950s?
The construction of the walls, the plaster, again, the trim, that all looks to be original.
Okay. And are you familiar with the property having two gas meters?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Is there any questions for Mr. Curtis? Okay.
Do you have any photos of the interior of the property?
No, not with me.
Did you take any?
Yes.
Is there any reason you didn't bring them?
Didn't think I needed them myself to bring them.
Okay. And if I could briefly ask a couple questions to my client. Mr. Altskan, you're the owner of the property?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Yes.
A-R-K-A-D-Y. It's my first name, and the last name is A-L-T-S-K-A-N as in Nancy.
Okay, Mr. Altskan, you're familiar with the property, obviously?
Yes.
And you purchased the property, and what is it that you found upon purchasing the property and going inside for the first time?
Well, we found two apartments. We found also a person who lived there, and took us some time to explain him that he doesn't have to continue, and
So to evict him?
right.
Okay.
And we also found that the property was used as two units, 2 kitchens, and 2 gas meters.
Okay.
The
And,
broadest-
okay. And have you started doing some demolition work on the property in advance of construction?
Yeah.
Any other questions for?
I'm just confused. When he purchased the property, there were two different families living in the unit, or 2 different individuals living in 2 different units?
No, we found it was one individual who was living in one unit, and the second unit was vacant. Apparently, that was a previous owner of that house who moved out to Chicago or something. The property was purchased at the sheriff's sale.
Okay. And how long have you owned the property?
About 6 months, I would say.
And do you know when the last time the other unit was occupied?
I didn't see it. I mean, I don't know. It can be speculation on my part, but I don't want to, I don't know.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Burgunder, I'm sorry, go ahead. Is there a vacant house notice on this property?
I don't believe there is, but I don't know.
We'll check.
Okay.
Is there any indication on the front door or right outside the front door of the 2 entrances of 2 different unit numbers?
No, it's just a door.
Okay.
So the entry is
It's a
the single
common
entry,
entry,
common
yeah.
entry with a common hallway.
Okay.
To
And
2
so for the
entrances.
units which you contend are 2 units, is there anything demarking those as 2 separate units? Like A, B, 1, 2?
No, I think, I don't believe that there was, but Mr. Curtis could address the construction of those and how those units were built, how those doors were built and how they're laid out.
I don't remember seeing it, that they were 2 demarcations, but the trim around both doors on the interior of it, not on the exterior, but on the interior, lend itself to think that those were the entry doors, just the level of detail around the trim.
And there's a common hallway in the center entrance
Correct.
hallway.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I can add something, from what I know, the previous owner allowed that squatter to live at the second apartment free of charge when he was there, I guess, and then after he moved out. So there was no need for them to kind of mark those units. They were kind of knowing each other. One allowed the second one to live there.
Are there locks on the 2 doors that you indicate appear to be the entryway doors?
Yes.
Okay,
Any other questions?
I don't think so. Let's hear from your opposition, if you're finished.
Yes.
Sherry Higgins with the Woodbury Community Association.
My name is Ryan Bodie. That's Boddy. I'm the resident at 2282, which is the attached building.
If we could reference the satellite view that council provided. If you'll look at the 3rd unit, the one with the
Turn it upside down.
upside down,
That's okay.
the serrated roofs here, that's, and Ryan, correct me, 2274 and 2272. Those are both now owned as single-family homes. And in 2015, 2016, 2017, Michael Volatile, who owns that unit, as well as 2078, which is a legal 2-apartment building, worked with the community association with the desire to make 74 and 72 multifamily units. There was no support from the community to divide up basically 1,750 square foot homes. Given the housing market, a larger home, especially with a rear yard for children or dog, is very desirable. When the community association and the neighbors would not grant Mr. Volatile agreement to divide, he then withdrew from the zoning board and continued renovation as single-family homes, immediately sold 2272, and rented 74 for a year, and that renter has since bought. The homes in the middle are disheveled, and further on down are disheveled. And the block is beginning to see a resurgence of ownership or pride that is a credit both to the block. The Community Association did not resubmit material for today because in conversations with the architect, Mr. Cabarella, early on, and Ms. Queener, mid-October, we indicated that we had canvassed the neighbors on that block and immediately above it and on Green Spring. So about 25 neighbors found no one that wanted to see an attractive home divided. That single-family rental or single-family ownership was the way that we saw our property values increasing, and we wanted to go that direction. I will note Mr. Curtis would not have pictures to present today of door frames and locks. The house has been heavily under construction since August, with new permits late September. So if one would go in there or just viewing it as I would drive by, one would assume we have new doors, new windows, new appliances, that there has been a full-blown effort to continue building even though we had a reschedule going on. So to summarize, I did not resubmit, but Mr. Baumgartner should have my letter and several emails from August. That has not changed. We have talked to the architect. We have talked to the council. We also asked the price. The council didn't know what the rent was going to be. If you assume a 1,750 square foot home or property, we're definitely under 1,000 square feet, so about 850 square feet per unit. Our experience in the neighborhood of quality renovations of apartments that have remained apartments is about $850 to $900 a month, whereas a single-family large home can command $1,600 to $1,700, especially considering we have a yard. I think that kind of summarizes it. We do want to maintain any homes and not have homes, as a community, not have homes divided. Council did indicate quite a bit of legislation from the 1950s. I hope that we are going to see from 2010 forward that we don't want to be chopping up houses, and that home ownership or single-family rentals is a credit to a community and not a detractor.
Thank you.
Again, I'm the owner and resident at 2282, which is the attached property. I've lived in my home since 2010. I can state unequivocally that the house was occupied illegally as a multifamily dwelling while I've lived in the property. This was done specifically. There were cases brought against the owner, the previous owner, which was, I don't remember his name, his last name, his first name was Noah. It's all obviously available in public record, but there were cases specifically brought against that because there were no division of utilities in the dwelling. I served as a witness for the residents who were suing Noah, who was the owner at the time. In addition to that, there's been work done continuously on the property, and I'd been in the property prior to its current state. Obviously, as Ms. Higgins mentioned, there is lots of work that's been going on, both within and without permits. And quite frankly, I can tell you that it was framed out in a haphazard fashion. It wasn't done professionally. It isn't two dwellings. It was chopped into two illegally. Addition to that, I can state unequivocally, they've continued work. There's permits that have not been pulled for work that's been done in the rear of the house. They built a deck. They dislodged my utility line from the brick that's attached in the middle of our units. No comment has been made to me about this, and yet they've continued this construction throughout, despite the fact that this appeal was postponed. I definitely don't want to see it turned into multifamily dwellings because of the effect it'll have on my own home and my property, as well as the neighborhood. And in addition to that, you know, I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be one unit, the same way as 2272 and 2274 have been changed to be a benefit to the community. Obviously, all of this is at your discretion, and I appreciate your consideration. It's not historically it's a multifamily dwelling, and it hasn't been, period. When it was being used as a multifamily dwelling, it was being done so illegally, and the residents of both the upstairs and downstairs apartments were forced to split utility bills amongst themselves, which led to conflict that I witnessed. So I don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see continued density increasing on the block, and it would be great to see it turned into a single-family home and benefit both, you know, the main structure that I share with this property and the entire neighborhood. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Baumgarten, and just a quick question for you. We've heard testimony, I believe, from the owner that there are 2 gas meters in the
Yes.
property. Are there 2 electric meters?
No, I think one electric meter.
Just 1 electric meter?
Right.
But 2 gas meters for the properties.
As far as permits, everything what is done is done.
You had-
Permits,
had,
and as far as like, you know, city will have inspection as far as
Okay,
like framing and
okay.
everything else.
Okay.
We'll give you the opportunity to close.
Yes. So, while I appreciate the neighbor's concern about the property that is 2 houses down with the striated or striped roof, and that the owner decided to convert those, and one of those had the zoning card from 1955 for 2 families. I think that
Wait, excuse me, we're one at a time. We set the rules before we started the hearing today.
the properties on the block, the ones that actually have zoning cards, show that all of these units, the 5 that have zoning cards, were all multifamily units. We believe that that is indicative of the fact that these houses were, as the architect said, purpose-built as 2 units, dating from at least the 1950s. For the 2-unit use, it's as far back as we can tell. There's nothing on the zoning card dating back into the 20s or anything else like that. But at the time, you didn't need to have a permit to have it be 2 units. And so there, across the city, in the 1950s, there were a lot of houses that were converted into 2 dwelling units. When the city started doing the surveys in the 1950s, all the houses that have zoning cards were all 2 dwelling units. We believe that this property was as well. And based on, while there's nothing on the zoning card, based on the architectural review by Mr. Carvalho's office of the trim, the 2 kitchens, the stacked kitchens, the 2 bathrooms, the 2 master bedrooms, and the construction and the existence of 2 meters. In the 1950s, if you wanted to have 2 gas meters, you had to get permission from BGE, and BGE would check that with the city, obviously. So we believe that while there aren't any records to support it, there wouldn't have been any records to have supported it. And that's why we believe that the history of the properties in the block, how they were all built at the same time, and the fact of the architectural detail that is associated with 2 dwelling units, that this is a grandfathered use and should remain as such.
Great. And Mr. Baumgartner, I just make sure, is there a vacant house notice on this property?
We have no record of one being issued.
Okay.
And I did want to state for the record that we do have letters from Ms. Higgins and the Community Association, as well as 5 or 6 community residents stating similar testimony to what Ms. Higgins had testified to. They were tucked in the back of the folder, so we missed them.
Okay, any question from the board?
Or, Mr. Curtis, when did you visit the property? And do the inspection, or?
I don't know exactly what date, but it was this year.
Was it, you've heard testimony about this renovation and construction that's ongoing? Was there active?
At the time that I went out, no.
You believe it was before September? Before August?
Yeah, we went out. It was early in the year.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next case, 2018-273, 118 East 24th Street, Carl Nunn.
Hello, sir.
Good
My
afternoon.
name is Greg Kelly. I'm Carl Nunn is the contractor. I'm one of the owners of the building.
Okay, we'll get you sworn in a second.
I'm Peter Duvall, neighborhood resident and with the Charles Village Civic Association Land Use Committee.
Are you in opposition or in favor?
In favor.
Okay. You're on the right side then. Correct side of me, I
Usually
should
on
say.
the other side, but, you know, every once in a while.
Raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
And we have this to use as 4 dwelling units, is that correct?
That is correct.
Correct. And do we have any staff reports?
Yes, Planning Department reviewed this application, noted that this property is authorized for 3 dwelling units since 1959, and the proposal is to add a 4th dwelling unit in the basement of the structure. Because of the insufficient lot area, the variance that would be required in order for approval of 4 dwelling units on this property would be 50%. The department considers this variance an amount that is excessive in relation to the amount required by the zoning code. Separately, for that reason, the department also notes that the application did not present any description of an unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty that would result from retaining the property in its present authorized use as 3 dwelling units. The department therefore recommends disapproval of the application because the lot area variance requested and the amount of lot area variance needed for approval is excessive in relation to the amount required by the zoning code, and because the application does not describe an unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty associated with continuing use of the property as a multifamily dwelling containing 3 dwelling units. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Why don't you describe what you want to do, and if you could address, excuse me, the planning department's concerns, that would be very helpful for us.
Sure. Well, we bought a house that, I see you do have pictures of the house in your, it's a historic building in the neighborhood, and it is a vacant building that has severe internal neglect that needs a lot of work, as well as the external. I don't know if you can see the braces on that particular picture, but we had to brace the outside up just to make sure that, you know, this all stays structurally sound while we're waiting for this process before we can start building. But you know, we would love to be able to keep this building as a historical building in the neighborhood, and we've worked with the community association. They've voiced their concerns with things that need to be done, and the hardship that we feel that we have is because of the severe nature of the neglect, both internally and structurally, as well as trying to preserve the outside exterior of the building historically as much as possible, that we've talked with the association and agreed upon, that including the 4th unit in the basement would be a necessary thing for us to make it all work, to leave a good footprint in the city with a historical building that they're proud of.
You mean to make it work economically?
Sure.
Okay.
Yep. I don't know, just the windows, you know, that we're looking to preserve. You know, the difference of putting in a set of windows, just builder grade windows, is $10,000 versus $42,000. It's a pretty big hardship just in windows. But we talk about the I guess the exception that is needed because of parking. This particular building is a corner lot. It has no other, I guess, conflicting buildings across the street or around it to vie for parking. There's certainly plenty and ample parking in the area to support an extra unit. Not sure what else that.
Okay.
Yes, I want to speak for a second about why the Community Association, Civic Association made its decision. There's a couple of things that the Civic Association tries to avoid in cases where extra units go into a building. One of them is the splitting the floor plates on the floor into more than one unit, and that's not being asked for here. The other thing that people try to do is put a basement unit in a building that's not on a corner that has like 2 little windows in the front. But we have a history of approving basement units in corner buildings with big windows on the basement unit when they're English basement and the windows substantially out of the ground. So it didn't hit any of the red flags as to why the Civic Association would oppose these plans. And additionally, we're very concerned, and I can see this building from my house. It's a beautiful Queen Anne style row house. It's kind of unusual for Baltimore because that wasn't a normal style here. It's very fancy windows in it that still kind of exist, even though they're falling apart and falling out. Mr. Kelly has agreed to repair them as much as possible, and that is really a big deal because the windows are actually unusual in this house. And the fact that it sits on a prominent corner on Calvert Street where all these cars pass by it, and it still, despite its very, very poor condition, still looks pretty intact, and it's going to stay looking intact when the project is done, was a primary consideration for what we're wanting to do. And the number of units and what you need to make the whole thing work, adding an extra unit to make the whole thing work and leave the building the way it should look, made the whole thing make sense for Charles Village.
Okay.
And if you look at the floor plans, you can see that there are, from the basement, 6 rather pretty large, I think 36 by 42 and 36 by 48 size windows for the basement, which gives ample lighting, and there are access area, to get outside from the basement as well. So.
And I'd say that the setup that this building will have is not unusual throughout Charles Village on the corner buildings, and they usually have more units.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next case is 2018-284, 3710 Ford's Lane. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Rich Weiger.
Okay, hold on one second.
You raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Ms. Schwager, we have this to construct one-story addition to increase from 60 to 81 child daycare centers. Is that correct?
Yes, please.
Great. Do we have any staff reports?
Yes, thank you. Planning Department has reviewed this application, which proposes to increase the number of children from 60 to 81, and the number of employees caring for those children from 13 to 18. The department is essentially supportive of this application, but notes that there is a need to provide additional parking spaces for the additional staff who would be employed as a result of the increase in the capacity of this daycare center. The department recommends approval of this application, subject to the condition that sufficient off-street parking is provided for the additional daycare staff necessitated by the increase in the number of children being cared for at the facility. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Schwager, is that a condition acceptable to you?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, we are neighboring with a large synagogue, Etz Chaim, and prior to me opening the daycare center, we already got an approval to use their parking lot, which is huge. They have like 60, 80, or even more parking spaces. So we are all using that parking lot as our drop-off and pick-up, plus...
Do you have the exclusive use of that parking lot for your purposes?
No, it's not an exclusive, but we are joined.
Do you have a lease?
No.
Okay.
But I have a letter from them which was originated that we may use it.
Okay. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the project and address, are you part of the church or are you independent of the church?
No, I'm totally independent. We just share the parking lot. We share the snow plow bills and all of that, of course. And we also have insurance on that, including that parking lot between both of us.
Okay.
So, like my insurance and everything includes the parking lot just as well.
So, are you leasing the space from the church for the daycare center?
No, we are not leasing.
No, you're not leasing?
No, there's no money in it except we share the expenses of taking care of it.
Okay, are you affiliated with the church?
Yeah, it's a synagogue, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand you.
It's a synagogue, it's not a church.
sorry, it's a
but-
synagogue,
but
sorry.
It's fine, it's the same thing.
More or less. Yeah, are you affiliated with the church, or with the synagogue? Sorry.
Yeah, we are,
You are?
yes.
So is this a synagogue-sponsored activity? I'm trying to understand the
No,
relationship.
no, it's not. I am a daycare.
Right.
But before I opened the daycare, which was about 13, 14 years ago, I needed to bring parking spaces to be approved for the zoning. So I spoke to them, and they gave me a letter, which should be in your records, actually, from when I opened it, that I may use the parking lot. So there's plenty. Plus, there's plenty of parking spaces right around the corner from me on the street, just as well for employees or whoever wants.
Well, that's why I asked you to address the concerns, the points raised by planning, because planning specifically spoke about off-street parking.
Yeah, so we have the off-street parking by Etz Chaim.
Okay.
I mean, you know, there's,
If we were to approve this, we may require that you have a lease or a legal right to use the additional parking spaces? So I'm just,
you mean like the letter that I provided to
I
you?
don't,
for
I don't
the-
have your letter. I'm flipping through my pile here. I don't have a letter.
Okay,
And we're not gonna make a legal determination whether that's a valid lease or not. We'll just, if that's what this board decides to do, then we would give you that condition.
okay. So then what do I have to lease, actually?
Well, you don't have to do anything. I'm just telling you what we may do, okay?
Okay, yeah, no, I'm just trying to understand, like, what, you know, okay.
Any questions from the board or staff?
I'm looking for a copy of that letter. Was that submitted with this application, or was it with the prior appeal
No,
back in
from-
2006?
2006.
Aha. So there was an agreement with that neighboring property to use that lot for your original daycare use in 2006.
Right.
Okay, so just so that you understand, when you increase capacity, you have to increase parking. So the chairman's question about that parking lease is that the law requires a binding lease for the future use of that parking. So that's why those questions were about parking.
Oh, that's okay.
If you can provide a copy of that letter, that would be helpful.
Sure.
I don't see it in the file from 2006, but that doesn't mean that you didn't submit it 15
Okay.
years ago. It just means that we don't have it right now.
All right.
But that was the only comment I had. Mr.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Now, if you could supply that in the near future, that would be very helpful for us.
Okay, so how do I supply, like, to who am I bringing it?
You would supply it to Mr. Baumgardner?
So you can mail it to our office, or you can drop it by, or you can email it, however you
Okay,
prefer
may
to
I
do that.
have your address, or?
Well, someone filed the appeal with our office, and they would
Oh,
have had to.
so I have to go back to Fayette Street.
Correct. Or you can email me a copy of it
Okay.
to that email address.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Next case, 2018-314, 3810 Norfolk Avenue. Called again, 2018-314, 3810 Norfolk Avenue. Is Mr. Arnold? Let's get everyone sworn in. He's going to provide testimony.
Raise your right hand. Swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Good. State your name for the record, please.
My name is Hal Arnold.
Okay, Mr. Arnold, we have this used as 2 dwelling units with 2 rear parking spaces. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great. Any staff reports?
I have a letter of opposition from a gentleman named Wayne Randall, listed at 3809 Norfolk Avenue. He says that he's the property owner in this block of Norfolk Avenue, and I'm opposed to this zoning change. The property owners have not done any repairs, not cut the grass all summer. Trash is on the front lawn, porch and drains are down, front steps need repairs, front porch is ready to fall, and fence needs repairs. Sites that illegal drug dealers use this property as shelter for bad weather. The owners of 3810 Norfolk Avenue have been negative in repairing this property, and it shows a double dwelling in this house means additional problems with cleanup, grass, trash, additional cars, etc.
Planning Department reviewed this application, noted that because this property is located in the R5 zoning district, that a conversion of a single-family dwelling to a multifamily dwelling is not allowed by the zoning code in that district. The record available to the Planning Department shows that the property was last authorized for use as a single-family dwelling, and therefore the department recommends disapproval for the reason that the zoning code does not authorize conversion of a single-family dwelling to a multifamily dwelling in the R5 zoning district where the property is located. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Arnold, tell us about your project, and if you would address the points raised by the Planning Department, that would be very helpful for us.
Yeah, the property is in the middle of block, right off of Garrison 3810. There was a previous owner. This is a new owner. When I went to the property initially to measure the house up, take pictures, there were guys in front of the house doing all kinds of stuff. So I told them I'm going to work on the house and I want to take pictures. So they ran away and said, we don't want to be in no picture. We filed the appeal and put the sign up. When we came here to the board, somebody took the sign, and so they told us that we couldn't have the hearing. I went back to the property. The sign was on the porch behind the wall. So I put the sign back up and made another sign. I put one on the inside window and one on the door. So the previous owner that may have neglected the property is something that's related to the previous owner. The history of the property, which I gave to Mr. French, which I'm concerned because he didn't even indicate it, has shown the property was 2 dwelling units from 1955 up until 2015. At that point, the previous owner neglected to update the registration as 2 dwelling units, so it became vacant. So his information is totally incorrect. The property was never single family. It was always 2 dwelling units, and then it went vacant because of the vacant house notice. We just bring it back to what it always was. So I'm very concerned that I gave him the documents from Mr. Blackwell, who's in zoning, who gave me the history of the property from 1955 up until 2015, always 2 dwelling units. And he says, I see that it was 2 dwelling units. We had misinformation, and now he's not even speaking on that. So that's somewhat of a concern. And we have the floor plans and the 2 parking spaces in the back, but again, because of the zoning R5 and things like that, I understand that. But he said, based on the history, and we proved that it's always been 2 dwelling units, then there should be no opposition. So I don't know where I stand, because I'm kind of like in shock to hearing him say that it was single family, and he doesn't know when I sat right there and told him. So I'm confused right now.
Do you have the history that you provided to Mr. French?
This is the history card right here. That's the card. When you go to zoning, in room 147, over in room 417 Fair Street, on the first floor, where Jeffrey Veal works and all of the guys in zoning, they have a drawer, and they open the drawer up, and it's got a history on every property in Baltimore, just like what the guy talked about. The history on this property has always been 2 dwelling units. There's never, nothing on any card ever says single family. Do you remember that conversation, Mr. French?
Yeah.
What happened?
I would suggest letting the board review those particular cards. They need to make a determination of whether there was an action completed to reduce the number of dwelling units from 2 to 1.
You should talk to Robert Blackwell, because he's the guy.
We're not going to get an argument between you two. So,
Oh, I do put that in there.
there was a vacant house notice in November 21st of '07. Issued to use for 2 families in 1958. 2 families, 1959.
The records never on any card say single family. It always says 2 dwelling. The only reason why it goes vacant is because the owner doesn't update the status of the use.
Well,
But
it says here, August 7th of 2007, appeal number 67-07, disapproved for 2 dwelling units.
that was an error. That was 3811. It was across the street. So they just wrote the wrong address on it. It was never disapproved for 2 dwelling units. So that was another error that they have on the documents, which we verified.
And then in 2008, filed reduce occupancy from 2 dwelling units to a
And
single
that was
family.
across the street. That was they wrote the wrong address on the card. That's 3811. We at 3810, which is across the street.
Okay. Mr. Baumgartner, can you shed any light on this?
Not much more than Mr. Arnold has. The zoning cards do indicate or two dwelling unit use since the late 1950s. What Mr. French might be referring to is that there's an indication on that zoning card that in 2008, a certificate of occupancy was issued to reduce from 2 DUs to single family, but there's a notation at the bottom that says never issued. I don't recognize the handwriting, so
Blackwell,
I'm not.
you made a mistake. Okay.
So I'm not sure who wrote that in there, who on city staff would have written that in there. But that is indicated on the zoning card. But the 2 DUs are mentioned, as the chairman mentioned, for in 1958. Actually, they're both 1958 entries. The city parcel sheet indicates single family, but as what came up in an earlier appeal under the prior zoning code, when properties went vacant, they reverted to single family status. So the city system may automatically change once that vacant building notice is issued. That is no longer the law, however, so properties that go vacant do not lose their multifamily status just because of vacancy. But it would be for the board to determine if there's sufficient evidence to indicate a continued use of two dwelling units since in this case, 1950s until present. It's probably not all that helpful, but
And we
that's
do have a
what I
vacant
have.
housing notice in 2015, is that correct?
We do not, so.
Somebody said that. I thought.
We don't have it on our staff
I don't think it was
report.
that year,
Okay.
but that was the previous one. They just didn't.
That was 38.
Right.
10. Yeah, so for 3810, on the zoning card, it doesn't issue, it does mention that a vacant house notice was issued in 2014, would have been under the old code, so would have
And
reverted
that's,
at the time.
Mr. French, could that have resulted in the planning department's determination that it was a single family because it?
Yeah, the record that we had available to us at the time that this memorandum was written just simply showed single family. And that's probably because, as Mr. Baumgartner explained, under the old code, a vacant property took the status of a single family dwelling.
And I think that's an error, because it doesn't apply.
Okay. Anything else? Any questions from the board?
No. At one point, you had some papers up as if you wanted to submit them.
No, that was where we're showing where we pulled the appeal, and it's showing, oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
My name is Jamie Williams, Jammie. Where we pulled the appeal, that's written on the card, and it's showing that it's the incorrect address.
This is the original appeal filed for 3811 to go for the single family, which was disapproved. And this appeal was converted on the zoning card to show 3810. So this appeal, which is on the card, has this appeal number. So that's where the misconfusion and the error came to even say that it was ever single family. So this is just a copy of the old appeal in 2008.
Can you submit that up?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Just so we have it for the
And
record.
that's why Blackwell researched it, and he said, I'm the one that did this, and it was a mistake. So we tried to give it to Mr. French and explain to him where the miscommunication started and how it happened.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? No. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank
Okay, next case, 2018-348, 3902 Overly Avenue. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Get you sworn in a second here.
Raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Great. Can you state your names, please?
My name is Micah English.
Kevin English.
Okay. And Brandy Sheard.
She just stepped out of the
She went
room.
out.
Is she the appellant?
Yes, she's the applicant, I'm the owner.
Okay, do you want to wait for her to come back in?
I can speak.
We can continue.
Okay, okay. All right, so we have this to-use portion as 90-child daycare center, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, and do we have staff reports? Do we have any staff reports?
Yes. We have a letter addressed from the president of the Overley Community Association, who writes, writing on behalf of the Overley Community Association regarding the above referenced appeal. We've informed our community members of this appeal and elicited their comments. Several letters were received from the community and are attached here too. So in regard to, in which essentially the Community Association summarizes those letters that they've received. In respect to this appeal, several of our Community Association members have expressed opposition to the use of 3902 Overley Avenue as a daycare center for up to 90 children. In particular, our members are most concerned about the requested capacity of 90 children for this facility and the traffic issues that may result from this use. Additionally, members of the association familiar with the building do not believe that it can accommodate 90 children. Some members also noted concerns regarding noise. 3902 Overley Avenue is accessed via narrow primary single-lane roads, Overley Avenue to the south, Sedonia to the east. Much of the traffic departing this location travels east down Overley Avenue, which is one-way, single-lane road with parking on both sides of the street. Neighbors have previously reported traffic and parking issues associated with special events at this address. Although we have met with the pastor of the Open Bible Baptist Church on this issue and feel that he was responsive to our concerns. We have communicated our concerns to the pastor of the Open Bible Baptist Church. He acknowledged that they did not have physical premises necessary to accommodate up to 90 children at this point, and indicated that they intend to provide daycare services to a maximum of 39 children. The Overley Community Association feels that this is a more reasonable maximum capacity for this site, but would still request that the efforts be made to ensure that the facility does not substantially disrupt neighborhood traffic.
Thank you.
Planning Department reviewed this application and noted that there was a previous approval by the board for use of this property as a daycare center for 82 children back in 2013. The applicant therefore is essentially asking for an increase of 8 children in the total capacity of the daycare center, or a 10% increase. The property does have a suitable location for drop-off and pickup of children. It also has, at this current time, over 30 off-street parking spaces provided on site. Even though that number might be reduced if they have to augment the outdoor play area for increased number of children, the Planning Department still considers this site sufficient for the purpose proposed. The department therefore recommends approval of the application, which is a modification of the conditional use previously approved by the board for this property. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Tell us about your project.
Well, the project, and let me just speak on a couple of things that was mentioned in the letter. I'm actually the pastor of the Open Bible Church, and we recently purchased that building, just been a year, just past Sunday, and it was sold to us with, double church and daycare center because it did operate. They had a license for 49 children using one level of that building. It's a 2-level building using one level for 49 children. We do have 75 to 80 parking spaces, not 35. And then in addition to that, we actually own 6808 Sedonia Avenue, which is, if you look at the outline, you see the grass next to the church. We actually own that, which is where the playground for the daycare is. So play area would not affect parking at all, because, and then I do want to mention, they mentioned drop off of children in the morning. The door to the daycare center, the entrance and the exit, is on the parking lot. So the parents coming to drop their kids off and pick them up would actually park on the parking lot, and they would not have to block Overley Avenue at all. And I would mention that we are 1 block off of Northern Parkway, and there are actually no houses on the block of Sedonia Avenue going from the church at Overley and Sedonia to Northern Parkway. There are actually no houses, and there's no parking. So parents could actually arrive and leave the church without disrupting the neighborhood at all. So I did speak to not the president, but I spoke to the husband of the president of Overley. We had a really good conversation on the phone the other day. And he mentioned that overall the concern was the 90 children. And other than that, he understood about the parking, he understood about the playground, and that we had ample space and property to do this without disrupting anyone.
Okay. Anything you want to add?
Basically, the 90, we don't know how many children will be approved for until the Office of Child Care come out. We put that number, but we don't have to operate at that number. We just knew we were going to use both levels to operate the daycare, whereas before they were just using one level.
Okay, but you do want to maintain the 90 child number for this
Well, the
appeal?
request is for the 90, but as my wife was saying, child care could come out and say, no, 60. Or they could come out and say, and whatever they say, we have to legally operate. We can only legally operate within those numbers.
The main purpose for doing that was just so we wouldn't have to revisit. So we just went to the maximum number.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions from the board?
No. Will the church be operating the daycare?
At this,
No, go ahead.
Actually, I'll be leasing that portion of the building from the church.
Okay.
So, and also in regards to parking, the hours of operation, there will not be a time where the congregants and the parents will be there at the same time. So parking still will not be an issue.
Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, you have a question?
No.
No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next case is 2018-350, 1433 Loman Street. And while they're coming up, I just announced that 2018-347, 3713 Eastern Avenue has been postponed. We announced that early on, but I wanted to announce that again. All right, let's get everybody sworn in. It's going to provide testimony.
Raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Great. State your name for the record, please.
Julie Tice.
Ms. Tice, we have this to construct first and second floor rear additions, third floor addition with fourth level stair penthouse to front deck. Is that correct?
That is the correct application, yes.
Great, thank you. Staff reports.
Planning Department has reviewed this application, has no objection or comment on it other than the point that this design will be subject to review according to the terms of the design manual for Baltimore City. Thank you.
Okay. Tell us about your project.
Sure. So the original proposal was for a first and second floor rear addition to come out within 3 feet of the rear property line, and to do a third floor addition over that whole new footprint, and then the fourth floor stair access only to a roof deck. The owners are Shay and Tim. They're right here with me. And the point for all of this is for them to expand their current primary residence to be able to accommodate their growing family. So that is the proposal. We have been in discussion with the Locust Point residents who raised some objections to the fourth floor structure. So we have reached an agreement that I believe we're still going to hold to, which is we will remove the fourth floor from the appeal altogether and just pursue the rear additions and the third floor additions. So I believe we're down to the only variances are for the rear yard setback and subsequent lot coverage.
Okay, you're the opposition,
Yes.
and you've all reached, you're with the Community Association? Have you reached, are you in agreement with what was just put on the record?
Yes.
Okay, so are you?
Your name, sir, before we get ahead of ourselves.
Matthew Farkowski.
Farkowski, spell it, please.
Farkosky.
You, sir.
Ken Ray, K-E-N. Last name's R-E-A.
So are you opposing any part of this now, or are you in agreement with the entire project with the removal of the fourth story?
After discussion, removing the fourth floor, we agree that they can build the outwards and eliminate the backyard setback.
Okay,
So no fourth floor, but increase the size of the building.
okay. And so Ms. Tice, we're amending this to remove the fourth floor stair penthouse.
Correct.
Great. Any questions from the board? Great. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Next case, 2018-354, 1940 to 1962, 1968, 1972, 1074, and 1976 through 1984 Bel Air Roads, CNI LLC. Okay, let's get you guys sworn in.
Swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Great. State your names for the record, please.
My name is Plus Jones with CNI LLC, Plus Jones Jr.
Eric Walker with New Broadway East Community Association.
Okay. And we have this to consolidate 1940 through 1984 Bel Air Road and construct gasoline station / convenience store with outdoor dining, 8-car multi-product dispensers, 3 truck multi-product dispensers, 1 bay truck wash, and police / safe streets structure.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any staff reports?
I have a letter from State Delegate Cheryl Glenn addressed to Mr. Baumgartner and the board. I'm writing on behalf of CNI and their South Clifton Park development to express our full support of the proposed fueling station at 1940 Bel Air Road project. I believe this project will meet and spark community development needs and provide economic benefits to Baltimore. Additionally, this endeavor will provide workforce development and employment opportunities to the community. I respectfully request that BMZA support this project as part of the overall development. And I believe the appellant has a couple letters that received, that he brought with him to enter into the record as well.
Planning Department reviewed this application and, more importantly, the design and concept plans that were submitted along with it. Noted that the original application made reference to a truck stop, which is not a permitted use in a C3 zoning district. It is a permitted use in a C4 district. The site plan does show that there would be a convenience store. I use the term site plan, the concept site plan. It also shows a truck wash, and it does not indicate if this is an enclosed building or a canopy, and a truck fueling canopy, which would be separate from the convenience store and the fueling canopy for automobiles. The department is, of course, concerned with the practical effect of routing the trucks down Homestead Street, which is a 2-lane street with about an 18-foot wide right-of-way, and would like for the details of this particular plan to be presented properly at the Site Plan Review Committee for consideration. The department has no objection to the application if the applicant demonstrates that the proposed use of part or all of the site would not be equivalent to a truck stop, which is a prohibited use in the C3 zoning district where this site is located. The department recommends that approval of the application be subject to the condition that all improvements to the property are completed in accordance with site plans, landscaping plans, and architectural plans approved by the Department of Planning. Thank you.
Great. Are you in agreement with the conditions that planning has raised?
Yeah, absolutely. I have no idea where the truck stop notion came from, but it was never.
We want to talk about that, but why don't you tell us about the project and tell us what you intend to do regarding trucks?
Okay, well, what we intend to do is consolidate the lots from 1940 to 1984 and to put a gasoline pumping station and a convenience store there with a commercial vendor. And the trucks, with the truck fueling, we anticipated because Route 1 and North Avenue, or Bel Air to North Avenue, is a designated truck route. We anticipated that trucks would come and stop for fueling. So instead of them coming into the main, we designed the road to go around the back, so there would be no inconvenience to the neighborhood and to the traffic.
Okay. Mr. Baumgartner, can you tell us the definition of a truck stop, since it's not permitted in the zoning?
Truck stop means a facility primarily for the retail sale of fuel for commercial vehicles. It includes the incidental repair or servicing of commercial vehicles and facilities for parking and for drivers to eat and rest. In addition, truck terminal means a facility primarily to accommodate the transfer of goods to trucks, truck trailers, or other vehicles, or to accommodate the parking or storage of commercial vehicles or trailers. I would highlight the word primary, meaning that the primary use would be for truck in the trucking industry.
Okay. Can you just talk with us a little bit about that?
Well, it's not it won't have any repairs. No truck repairs. It's just simply a fueling station for trucks. It is a convenience store first, automobile gas pump station first, and because of the truck route, we said it may attract the right commercial vendor to have a space where we can fuel trucks also.
So how much percentage square footage wise will be designated for the truck fueling?
Oh, just enough to, and if I had to put a percentage on it, is probably maybe 20%, but about 20% of the property.
Okay.
So the majority of the pumps are for?
It's for gas. Yeah, it's a major commercial vendor that's actually, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
What about the truck washing station?
It's right alongside the truck, the canopies for the trunk, maybe the pumping stations for the trucks on the same backside.
Is that part of the 25% or 24?
Yeah, all of that's in the same area, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Is this intended to be, the commercial vendor, will it be a Royal Farms, or is it still up in the air?
Royal Farms, there are a lot of interest. There's Royal Farms, there's Wawa, there's 7-Eleven, and Highs are all looking at it. So they're competing for it right now.
Understood.
So you're building to their spec?
Yeah, you have to build a desk spec, yes.
Well, one last question I had. There was a slight discrepancy between the plans and the application as to the number of pumps or fueling stations for cars. Every time we get a gas station appeal, I always confuse what's a pump, what's a fueling dispenser, what's a fuel. I will never understand it. Can you just give us a little more info as to?
From what I've learned since I've been involved in it is that a pump is two sides. So a car can be on one side, a car can be on another side. Yeah.
Okay. Then how many pumps are being proposed under this application?
8 for the automobiles and 4 for the trucks.
16.
Great. Any other questions from the board? No, thank you very much.
Excuse me, what's the community association have to say about it?
The South Clifton Pump, Eric Booker, New Broadway East Community Association, adjacent to South Clifton Park. We met with South Clifton Park's president and their constituency, and they are in favor of it. One of the immediate effects would be the fact that that building that has been there forever will eliminate that blight that's been in that space. As I have come before the board before and talked about Turning Point, which is just to the south, we've had a hard time attracting any developer to do anything in that space because of Turning Point. The fact that CNI is willing to do something there, and we think that is an amenity to the neighborhood, we supported South Clifton Park's decision to support this project. Also, I have a letter from our association as well as from Major Wells, who is the Eastern District Commander, who met on location as well, and they are planning to build a 1,000-square-foot police substation on that location, because what we don't desire is for the Turning Point traffic to work its way north. So they took all of that into consideration as we talked about the development of this land.
The developer's going to build it for the police department?
Yes.
Great. Would you like to make that part of the record?
I would. Thank you, sir.
Great. Now, any further questions? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Next case, 2018-356, 906 and 914 North Broadway. Mr. Prado, I believe you have already been sworn in.
I have.
Okay. Do we have any staff reports?
Yes, Planning Department has reviewed this application, noted it's proposing a subdivision of property. Subdivision requires approval by the Planning Commission. The Department of Planning therefore recommends that approval of the application be subject to the condition that the property is subdivided and all improvements are completed in accordance with the subdivision plan and the development plan approved by the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Great. And are those conditions acceptable?
Yes, they are.
Good. Tell us about your project.
Sure. Again, I'm Nate Predel, the planning firm AB Associates. I have Mr. Eric Booker from the New Broadway East Community Association here with me. And the proposal here is for 5 new construction, single-family for-sale townhomes on lots that my client purchased through the city's Vacancy to Values program. So some of the nature of the planning department's comments have to do with the subdivision, and up until the last week, it was really unclear the process. During the purchase, the lots were actually consolidated, really without the knowledge of my client, not that it was the wrong thing to do. There were some questions about the eventual width of the lots. This is before Transform Baltimore passed, so I guess at the time, housing thought it was necessary to consolidate them and sell them as a single parcel, even though when they were conveyed, it listed 5 separate deed descriptions. It's neither really here nor there. Our proposal is to go back to the previously existing lot lines. If you have a block plat in front of you as part of your file, it probably shows 5 separate lots instead of 1. It just hasn't been updated. This is an OR1 zoning district. The use is permitted by right. We're here to request very minor variances for rear yard setback and on the corner for a side corner yard setback, which is 10 feet are required. This is a 15-foot lot. I think it speaks to the practical difficulty and hardship that you can't build a 5-foot wide row house, nor would you want to. So the other uniqueness of this property that lends itself to the request for variance is these lots are the shortest of any in the several blocks of Broadway as you get up towards the Johns Hopkins and past Johns Hopkins area. The majority of the lots are 90 to 100 feet deep. We have roughly, I think, 64-foot deep lots. They vary a little bit on the bottom ones. That's the request, and the housing side, the size of the proposed structure will match pretty much every house that runs up and along this the west side of Broadway. So we think the variances are minimal. We think they're appropriate. We have the support of community leaders, and again through the city's HCD as well, because they sold the lots to my client for this proposed use. And I'll leave it at that, unless, and then I mentioned they each will have rear loading garages. One other thing that's worth mentioning is in the 70s, I think the city had condemned, there's about 30 to 60 row homes just behind this, which the new structures would back up pretty close to them. Now it's a parking lot for both, I think, the new Baptist church that's just to the north, as well as some garden-style apartments. So in terms of a setback, whereas this would have been maybe 10 feet from a house, now it's not. They won't be within 500 to 1,000 feet of anything. So I think the impact of the setback is non-existent.
Okay. Any questions?
No, good.
Great. Thank you very much. Next case, 2018-357, 1005 Edmondson Avenue. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'll get you sworn in a second.
Raise your right hand. Swear. One second. Raise your right hands.
Okay.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Will do.
Great. And would you state your name, please?
Benyam Zeriou.
Mr. Salazar, this is to use as 3 dwelling units, is that
Yes,
correct?
it was existing 3 units.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me see if we have any staff reports.
Yes, Planning Department reviewed this application, noted that this property is in the Harlem Park 2 Urban Renewal Plan area, where there are specific design standards for rehabilitation of properties, which this applicant would need to adhere to in the course of completing the renovation of the property. Planning Department also reviewed the records that were available to it, noted that the property has been vacant since 1995, which would have caused its status under the previous zoning code to become that of a single-family dwelling, as we've heard in a couple of cases before. However, the department noted there were actual records of 3 dwelling units being authorized in 1957, 61, and 62. Therefore, the department is recommending approval of the application, subject to the condition that all exterior changes to this property are completed in accordance with plans approved by the Department of Planning. Thank you.
And are those conditions acceptable to you?
Yes, will accept.
Okay, tell us about your project and tell us a little bit about the history of the project.
We just purchased recently the property. It was existing 3 units. There is a 4 electrical meter, 3 gas meter, and building is there is an existing bathrooms on the 3 locations on each one, and the kitchens are all on the 3 floors, and all the amenities are designed for 3 units.
Was it occupied when you bought it?
No,
No.
it was not
Totally
occupied.
vacant?
Yes.
Okay.
But one notice, we went to zoning, and the zoning said on the record it shows as 3 units. So that's what, after we checked with the zoning, that's what we purchased it actually.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Nope. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
2018-360, 3700 to 3710 East Northern Parkway. Good afternoon.
Raise your right hand. Swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes. I am her daughter, Raelise Allen.
Okay.
Raelise. Sure. R-A-E-L-E-S-E. Allen.
And Ms. Allen, this is to use the premises as a 30-child daycare center?
Yes.
That's correct. Okay, do we have staff reports?
It's a letter from the Overley Community Association saying I'm writing on behalf of the Overley Community Association regarding this appeal. We have informed our community members of the appeal and elicited their comments. Several of the letters we received from our community are attached. They summarized by saying we received no objections to the use of this property as a daycare center for up to 30 children. Several members of our community expressed support for this use, noting its location on a high-capacity road, supply of parking, and low likelihood of causing parking or traffic issues in the neighborhood. The Overley Community Association does not oppose this request.
Planning Department reviewed this application, noted that this property is on Northern Parkway, which of course is an extremely busy thoroughfare in Baltimore City. There is a suitable location for drop-off or pickup of children on the site, but the department recommends that the applicant work with Planning Department staff to devise a site plan that would allow vehicles to enter and exit the site without impeding traffic on Northern Parkway itself. The department recommends approval of this application, subject to the condition that this property is redeveloped in accordance with a site plan approved by the Department of Planning. Thank you.
Good. Do you agree with the conditions from the planning department?
Yes.
Great. I want you to tell us a little bit about what you want to do here.
My parents are developing a daycare center for up to 30 children. It used to be a former bank.
It used to be Slavi Federal Savings Bank.
Yes.
I know the bank.
Which does have an entrance as well as a side exit, so it won't impede traffic in any type of way, because it used to have an outside teller that you were able to go through and then come out on the side. So we won't have any issues with parking, pickup, drop-offs, or impede Northern Parkway traffic at all.
Okay. Any questions?
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, 2018-361, 122 South Haven Street. Which, excuse me, one second, which case are you here for?
Yeah, we just skipped over that one.
Oh, I'm sorry, my apologies. We will call your case, I'm sorry. No, I'm glad you said that. I did skip over it. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Let's get you sworn in.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
What's true?
Good. You state your name, please.
Jorge Diaz.
Okay, Mr. Diaz, we have this to use portion of premises as office. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Staff reports?
Yes, Planning Department has reviewed this application, noted that this property is zoned I-1, which is an industrial zone. The property, however, was last authorized for use as a single-family or row house dwelling, which is a non-conforming use in this I-1 district. The request to use the property for an office would need to be accompanied by evidence that there is an industrial use of this property, as the I-1 district requires that office use be secondary to a principal industrial use. The department therefore recommends approval of the application if the applicant provides information demonstrating that there is a current industrial use of the property to which the proposed office use could be secondary. Thank you.
Great. So you heard planning. We'd ask you to address the comments of planning and tell us about your project.
Yes, sir. First thing, I want to let you know, and I speak English real well. Probably some things don't understand, or probably some don't understand me. But the thing is, I got a family-owned company. My son, my grandson, my family, we work together. We shipping load to Honduras. For now, on my country, Honduras, and trying to ship to another country, Central America, like cargo and vehicles. We do, but we need an office. Is why we select this place, because this place for office. The landlord offered to me. Can I show you some pictures?
Sure.
The landlord offered to me this place for office already. That's already made for office, and that's supposed to it's an office before there. It's another office for another I don't know, another company, something like that. But there is an office before. The thing is it's two doors right there with the same number. If you see the picture, it's two doors in the same number, 122. The right door is the office, and the another door is the entrance for apartment. Yeah. But the two doors got the same number, 122. But before, they use it for an office, they say, the landlord. The rent to me, I got 2 months already paid for rent, and I waited for, I tried to get a permit for open office, but this is what I can explain to you, that it's supposed to get an office before there.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
I'm looking at this, it looks like which was built as a single-family dwelling, I guess, at one point. So what activity, are you just going to have office activities in this property, or is there another business going to be run, or what? Tell me about that.
No, I already get the place, I already pay rent, but I not got nothing now. It's there is so close. I just got some suppliers. I gotta use them.
But what do you intend to do in the future?
Oh no, that's just the office open the office for public for my customer. I got customers that send the stuff for vehicles to my country or Central America. We do through Cartagena Oceanland, these companies here. It's like, we loading container, but on Wilmington, Delaware. We take the load to Wilmington. We don't use storage right there, right here for put a load, nothing like that. Just we pretend to open office and got the packing supplies there.
Well, and the reason I was asking the question, as planning department said, this property is zoned industrial.
Industrial.
And an office use by itself is not permitted in an industrial area. If you have some sort of industrial use, then you can have an office to support that industrial use. But the primary use, at least under our understanding of the zoning code right now, is that you can't have solely an office use in an industrial zone property.
Oh. I don't understand too much, but industrial, okay.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any knowledge from the owner of the property for past office use in this location?
Yeah, they have an office before there.
What type of office was it?
I'm not really sure that they got engineering, something like that. I'm really not sure, but I know they have an office. They told me that they got an office before that.
The chairman is correct that in an industrial district, an office use has to be secondary. The one exception to that is that if the property was lawfully used as an office prior to June 1st, 2017. So it would be to your benefit if you had any information to tell the board as to a lawful use of an office in that location. If you can obtain that from the owner of the property, if you can obtain that through testimony, through neighbors, all those things would help establish this property as an office use before that June 1st, 2017 date.
We will give you if you'd like to postpone this case to bring that information back to us, we'll give you that opportunity.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you want to postpone?
Yeah, I want to
Okay.
postpone. Yeah.
Hey, Derek, why don't you make your card available in case it needs?
Sure. Mr. Diaz?
Yes, sir.
Questions about that, you can call me. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. When I postpone, or let me know. They let me know when I postpone the date.
Why don't you contact Mr. Baumgartner and let the two of you talk, and then we'll reschedule it.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, final case, 2018-359, 2402 Lakeview Avenue.
Lots of folks.
Sorry for the mix-up here. All right, let's get everybody who's going to provide testimony sworn in.
Raise your right hands, please. Everyone, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
And state your name, please.
Marty Dolphin.
Mr. Dolphin, we have this to use as 3 dwelling units, is that correct?
Correct.
Do we have staff reports?
Yes, we have one letter written, signed by the co-chair of the Reservoir Hill Improvement Council, stating that the Lakeview Block Watchers, a group of homeowners and renters in the 2400 block of Lakeview, has made clear to us their strong opposition to granting the appeal. RHIC, which represents the interest of all residents of the neighborhood, joins the Lakeview Block Watchers in opposition. The zoning code's restrictions regarding off-street parking spaces and sufficient lot size seem quite reasonable. We see no reason to waive them in order to create more multifamily housing in a neighborhood and on a block that has more than adequate supply. Rehabilitation of the property as a single-family home or an owner-occupied home with one rental unit would be more in keeping with the desires of neighbors and the entire community. We also have an email from Michelle Hawks-Kuehler, excuse me if I mispronounce it, who is a resident and homeowner in Reservoir Hill. I'm writing to urge you to oppose the petition for an increase in dwelling units from a single-family status to 3 DUs. We're working hard to stabilize a safer, more beautiful community. That depends on a delicate balance of homeowners and apartments. There are several large apartment projects coming online in the area. We need to keep all of the single-family zoning we can to balance it. I believe denying this request for zoning dwelling increases for the long-term good of the community. And then also an email from a Mr. Bruce Curtis, 2214 Brookfield Avenue, saying, just a quick note, I oppose the zoning appeal for the 2402 Lakeview Avenue.
Great, thank you.
Planning Department reviewed this application, noted that this property does appear on the city's electronic record as a single-family dwelling. However, that is because, as has been noted in other cases previously, this property has been vacant since 1993, if not earlier, at the time it received a vacant building notice, and therefore, under the terms of the previous zoning code, the use of the property status reverted to that of a single-family dwelling. There were 3 dwelling units authorized in accordance with permits issued in 1961 and 1962 for this property. The department notes that there is a concern about off-street parking in the vicinity of this property, and noting the fact that this particular building is now a freestanding building as a result of demolition of what were formerly attached houses on either side of it, there is a possibility that the applicant could acquire one of the vacant lots and consolidate it and use it to provide off-street parking for the units proposed. The department recommends that approval of the application be subject to the conditions that all exterior changes to the property are completed in accordance with plans approved by the Department of Planning, and that off-street parking spaces are provided for the residents of the proposed dwelling units. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Dolphin, do you agree with the conditions suggested by the planning department?
Well, in the rear of the property, there's a large swath of land. It's a very long lot. I believe it's 140 feet long, where we can fit 3 cars easily over there.
But it's only 16 feet wide. You're not going to fit 3 cars.
Of course you can. You can line them up. You do 1 and then 2. They 1, 1, and 1. Why can't you fit 3?
Well, you can.
Stacking spaces are not permitted under the
Stacking
code.
are not permitted.
Okay, so I want to get the grandfathered in. I want to have that grandfathered in. I mean, the building's already there. I'm not building a new building.
Okay.
I mean, I could try to acquire a lot, but you know how long the Baltimore City process is to acquire lots. It could take you maybe 2 years. Hence, it took almost 25 years to get this building to a developer that can complete it, so.
Okay. So just to be clear, you're not agreeing with the parking
I mean,
condition suggested
so
by
you're
the
saying,
plan?
they're saying that only grant me the 3 units if I would get the vacant lot from the city next door?
They're saying providing sufficient off-street parking.
Okay, so then I disagree with that. I'll say another thing. There is plenty of parking in this area. I don't know where they get that from. Maybe if you're talking an area like Greenmount West, there's maybe no parking there, but Res Hill, I'm there frankly twice a week. I never have a problem with parking during the day and at night.
Okay.
Do you plan to reside in the building?
I may take up one of the floors, I lived there 5 years ago.
All right, so tell us about your project, what you want to do.
So, the building is quite a large building. There's high demand for, rentals in that area. They're even, with being 3 units, they're still going to be very large units. We have experience in the area with building these apartments, and frankly, we've never had any other opposition. When we spoke with the councilperson regarding, building in this area, he's actually very pro-development, so I don't see what the issue is.
Do you have a letter to that effect?
No, I actually spoke to him about new development, building on the vacant land on that block. We just never proceeded with that project because we couldn't get the city to abate the liens for the private land.
This is Councilperson Pinkett.
Yes, Councilor Leon Pinkett.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would like to state for the record, the planning department is not specifically recommending that he acquire a vacant lot adjoining this property. It was merely suggested as a possible option. Obviously, we would like him to provide the off-street parking in whatever way would be appropriate. Thank you.
Understood.
Let me just add one thing. If, we could do we can simultaneously, we can put in an application to vacancy to value to get the lot while we're, proceeding with this project. We're fine with that as well. We can do that. I have no problem with that.
All right, we hear you. Let's hear from your opposition. And I see there's 5 of you. We would ask that you not repeat each other. So once we hear it, we hear it. But we will give everybody the opportunity to speak.
Hi, my name's Amelia Cox. Do you want me to spell that? Okay. So I live on Lakeview Avenue, directly across from the property in question. And 4 years ago, my husband and I bought from the city a vacancy to value shell and renovated it into our home, and it's where we live. The property at 2402 Lakeview is vacant and decrepit, but it's really rich with historic details from its single-family origins, including one of those rear staircases that goes up and original tin ceiling in the kitchen. It's important to me to note that Lakeview Avenue there's only one block of Lakeview Avenue. And so when we say the 2400 block of Lakeview Avenue, there is no other. It's Parallel Street, Callow, along with Lakeview, are viewed as the worst and most blighted streets in Reservoir Hill. Nonetheless, we made our home on Lakeview because it's what our little family could afford. And we had such positive neighbor encounters that we knew we would feel at home there. Also, we wanted to be a stabilizing influence. As I said, with Lakeview Avenue being just 1 block long, it already consists of mostly rental units. There are 5 commercial apartment buildings there. They contain 54 units. 11 of the single-family homes on the block are already used as rentals, some of them as multi-rental units. And on the whole block, there are just 15 owner-occupied homes. So I did the math, and that makes the owner occupancy rate 23%, when the citywide rate is 46%. So Lakeview already has twice as many rental units as any other given block in Baltimore. And those numbers don't take into account the presence of Lakeview Towers right at the end of the block, which is over 300 units. So we don't need more rental units on Lakeview Avenue. They would destabilize the block. We're working really hard to invest in its stability. And we find this particular developer to be problematic. Research in public records shows that through a series of LLCs, Mr. Dolphin owns or is responsible for dozens of rental properties in Baltimore City, most of them very low value. The median tax value of the properties I've located is about $50,000, which even in Baltimore is really low. So another way of saying this, it's a business model of making money off of poor people, and there's not a rule against that, but there are zoning rules against what he's trying to do with this property. And to quote from a neighbor of mine who's a 50-year resident of Lakeview Avenue, the rules are there for a reason, and we don't give special permission just so someone can make money off our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Don Auction. I'm with the Reservoir Hill Improvement Council. I wrote the letter that was cited a little earlier. I just want to add that Reservoir Hill is a neighborhood that is at a tipping point, and the homeowners represent the future of Reservoir Hill that the citizens would like to see. Mr. Dolphin represents the past. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rose Ferguson. I live on Lakeview Avenue. I bought my home in 1995 when I went to a Baltimore City auction. And when the 2400 block of the houses on the 2400 block came up, I chose Lakeview Avenue. When I was young and raised in that neighborhood, that was the block of all the blocks in that neighborhood where they had immaculate homes, flower boxes down the whole row. And when I bought that house, that's what I envisioned. It was neglected and run down, but I've lived there for 23 years, and the homeowners that come have stabilized it, myself included, and I have hope for that neighborhood. It's a whole different neighborhood than it was 23 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bruce Curtis. I was the author of one of the brief emails that was read earlier. Just want to add quickly my
Who are you again?
Bruce Curtis,
And where are you from?
Reservoir Hill. Hi.
I didn't hear you.
Okay.
That's all.
I just want to say my wife and I and our child have been there for several years. There are a lot of people working to improve what's been called Baltimore's most perennially up-and-coming neighborhood. And we need more homeowners, not more rentals. There are already a lot of rentals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kim Forsyth, and I would appreciate some time to voice some things on behalf of multiple people, one of which was a letter sent to you. For some reason, it wasn't read, but I was copied on the email that went to Derek Baumgartner, Chad Hayes, Liam Pickett, and it was by Mr. Paul Gettner. And I'd like to read it into the record. And that is not what I plan to do. I have other comments, but I want to make sure it's on record because he took time to write it. Paul is an architect and is a member. I am the CHAP rep for the neighborhood for the Mount Royal Terrace Historic District, which is not this home's historic district, but it's one of the historic districts in Reservoir Hill. And I'm also the president of the historic district. And Paul Gettner is my co-worker as a CHAP rep. He wrote, "Dear Mr. Baumgartner, as a Reservoir Hill resident for more than 43 years, I would not approve the development for the subject property site. Property conversion proposals continue to elevate as the Reservoir Hill neighborhood draws attention from developers and new property owners. Development intensified when Madison Park North and Drew Park property development, as an example, becomes more evident. Already, Reservoir Hill has many multifamily properties and apartment buildings. Reservoir Hill's future depends on maintaining the remaining single-family properties that encourages owner occupants and maintains a mix of single-family and multifamily properties. In addition, there are issues of increased vehicle traffic, parking constraints, trash and refuse collection when a single-family property converts to multifamily. The property is not retrievable unless a new owner considers the neighborhood property values to justify spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to renovate it back into a single family, or when converted to condominiums, a single buyer could purchase the property condominiums together and convert them to a single family residence. However, a buyer may choose to purchase a single family elsewhere depending on the financial options. Giving up a single family property for conversion to 3+ units is unwise in the Reservoir Hill neighborhood if we hope to progress and strengthen with a mix of single family and multifamily properties. We are at a critical juncture for Reservoir Hill. Keep in mind the development of Madison Park North appears to include more apartments and condominiums. In capital letters, we need to maintain single-family homes as single-family homes. Please carefully consider this in your review of this and other Reservoir Hill property proposals. Best regards, Paul Gettner, AIA, CCS, etc. I wanted to make sure that was read, but I am here on behalf of multiple people. My expertise is municipal analysis. I analyze cities for a living, and it's very important that Reservoir Hill maintain all single-family properties. I will cite, and I have nothing against the gentleman. We encourage investment in our neighborhood. We need to draw more people, but we also need to maintain very carefully the single-family properties. I will cite 2010 and 2000 census information. For example, total housing units, 1 unit detached, 1 unit attached, and 2 unit properties were 1,550 of 4,035. That means that essentially single family or equivalent were only 38% of the neighborhood. By 2010, total housing units, 3,840, of those occupied units, owner occupied was only 685, and renters were 2,219. That was 76%. As we all know, Madison Park North will be redeveloped. Madison Park North is expected to greatly enhance and increase the number of rental units, is expected to have 300 to 500 rental units. We already have, as I said, the breakdown in the 2016 numbers. The breakdown was 1,272 rooms were in owner-occupied houses or condominiums. 3,260 rooms were in rental. So basically, we have a profuse surplus of rentals, and we're going to get even more with Madison Park North, and we need to retain every single family we can. The main reason being that people such as myself moved from Guilford to Reservoir Hill on purpose because I wanted diversity. I wanted racial diversity, sexual diversity, age diversity, ethnic diversity, every single thing. I love that diversity, as most people do in Reservoir Hill, but in order to have it, we have to have a diversity of owner-occupants, renters, young, old, everything. If we lose all these single-family properties that we've gradually lost, we will no longer have a diverse neighborhood. We will have a rental property neighborhood, and we already have plenty of it. I guess I will abbreviate it because I had a lot more. I had multiple people ask me to make comments on their behalf, but I think I've made my point. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Delphin, we'll give you the opportunity to close.
Okay. First of all, I would like to address some of the comments from, the individuals standing up here. First, regarding my record, that all the properties, or majority of the properties, are taxed at $50,000. That is total nonsense, and I don't know where they got that
We
statistic.
heard that comment. I will tell you that's not really relevant to our decision here.
Well, hold on. They were basically saying that I represent the past. I totally disagree. I do not represent the past or any landlords from yesteryear. I'm actually into the future. Everything is totally redone, and we have professional management on everything. Regardless of what happens, whether it's, I don't think it's going to be a single-family home. And they didn't take calculation into the vacant land that's there, if it's a single-family home or not, the average of rental units on that block. So I would like you guys to consider that there's a ton of land over there, and pretty much, what's single-family, and what's rentals is rentals. That's my closing argument.
Okay. Any questions from the
Yeah,
board?
what do you mean regardless it's not going to be single family?
Meaning, I'm standing over here asking for approval for 3 units. So if I don't get 3, I'm most probably gonna get 2, unless one of these lovely neighbors has somebody else that wants to purchase the property from me and convert it into single-family home, which I'm open to that. So they're coming up saying, we only want single-family, like, they can't back me into a corner and get me to do a single-family. That's just not my model, I'm sorry, so. But I'm willing to, if they have somebody that wants to purchase the property for single-family, I'm open to working with them.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add a question for any of the neighbors, I don't know if you would.
No, go ahead.
Would allow me to open that back up again. Conversion of a property under the current zoning code is from single family to multifamily, 2, 3, 4, whatever it might be. There's been a lot of testimony about this property being single family. The zoning card from whatever date that was, I can't remember, shows 3 dwelling units. So in order for the board to agree with your position, the board would have to find that this property is legally a single-family dwelling unit. Do you have any information, testimony, documents, anything to show that this property is a single-family dwelling?
I think I can answer that very succinctly and say that I think that we aren't even assuming single, as we know many people can have a second unit very easily in their property if they'd like to. I mean, most people will not be opposed to that. However, as we also know, a property that goes to vacant has to go back to the drawing board and start from scratch. So it's not that we are saying we don't know. I don't think anyone is really paying attention to what it was. We're saying we have to hold steadfast now. We have such a low number of properties that are homes that appeal to home owners and to home renters, but families, for example. It's the type of people who we want to diversify the neighborhood. So I'm not assuming that one person versus another or one type will move into a property such as that. But we have all these people going in and trying to take investment into the neighborhood, which we want, but trying to say, oh, well, this always used to be 3-family, or this used to be 4 units. That's not the point. When it goes to vacant, you start over again. And we're trying to hold steadfast that we...
New zoning code, that's not necessarily true.
Well, if it's declared vacant, as I understand it as the CHAP rep, once it's declared vacant, they have to, at least Eric Holcomb confirmed that, so if that's incorrect.
That's the new zoning code has changed that.
Okay, well, they instructed me, because we confirmed it about another property, because we have another proposal, that if it was declared vacant, if it was a declared vacant property, that notices had to be posted and applications had to be proposed.
Yeah,
For example, we just had another property.
This is the reason why we were asking about the history of the property, because the zoning code has changed. It doesn't, before the new zoning code transformed in Baltimore, you were correct.
And I did
It would revert to a single family, but under the new code, it doesn't necessarily convert back to a single family automatically.
It doesn't necessarily, but in this case, I thought I confirmed that this property converted back. I'm saying that I contacted CHAP. They were not answering to me as this CHAP district, because this property is not in that district. But I asked them about this property and another property and was told they both had gone back to single family. So I might be wrong, but I got wrong.
I'll just tell you what the state of the law is today.
Okay. Well, this was 2 weeks ago, so I don't know what that
And I think that's the disconnect here, is that, this board is a board of limited jurisdiction, so we can only apply the zoning code as it is today. And I understand your concerns. I completely understand them. It's just, how do we match our current code, which is the law, with your concerns and the concerns of the developer, in this case, the property owner, and that whole conversion thing. I think that's what gets sticky, because it's not a conversion if the last authorized use was not as a single-family home.
Well,
For
we don't
example, we had a
assume
property earlier
right.
in which a property owner had purchased a multifamily property, had converted it into a single-family home with a permit. That then becomes that single-family home, but without that actual, I don't want to use the word conversion, without that permit being issued, without that inspection to say, yes, this is a single-family property, it's not a conversion. And so
okay, can I ask you, if someone from the city instructed me that this was declared, this went back to that structure 2 weeks ago, are they just incorrect?
Yes.
Okay. Second thing I'd like to point out is that I don't think that the neighborhood is saying we all understand that properties can many single-family property owners have a second unit in their building. Many have a second person living on the third floor. The main thing is that we're trying to retain home ownership. Now, we can't assume that if you renovate as a single family, that that'll be an owner. It could be a renter, and that's great. We just want more tenure out of some of the people. I was a renter, and then I became an owner. There are a lot of people who, I respect the renters equally to owners, because I was one. But we just want a mixture. And what happens is if we divide everything into apartment units, we will not get that mixture. And it will be out of balance, and we're already very out of balance. So I guess the problem is the information I was given by a city person appears to have been incorrect.
Correct.
But you're saying it was not declared, it was declared a vacant property, but it was not reverted to a single family because of records that this gentleman has indicating it was not a single family.
Not that he has, that we have as from the city.
They are city records.
And how many units was it?
Three. And 2 quick points of clarification, then I'll be through. The ability for a property in this district to go from single to multi is nil. So you had mentioned that there are other property owners, not necessarily on this block, but elsewhere throughout the city of Baltimore, that can just add a dwelling unit. That's not necessarily true.
No, we have.
Well, I just want to make the point that there's the rules regarding multifamily versus single family apply in many different zoning districts. The specific rule about reversions and conversions here is to do what you're saying. It's to make it much harder for a new property owner to take a single family and make it multifamily.
Right.
For example, if this property were completely razed, taken down to rubble and rebuilt, they could do multifamily by right. There'd be no hearing, there'd be no publication, no posting. They could get a permit by right. But because it's an existing structure that they are arguing was used in 1958 or whenever it was as 3 dwelling units, that it can keep that 3 dwelling units.
And you have
status.
confirmed that?
Yes. That's
because
on the city record.
Let me share with you one of my concerns that relates to this, and it's shared by many residents. The city is issuing permits without having any notification, no hearings, no nothing. That ain't okay, because we've got properties, I mean, we'll give you an example. There's a property right now that I can cite that is on, it's Newington, I believe. And we have contacted zoning code enforcement 4 times. We have reported it to 311. They've issued all the permits. They've never had a hearing, they've never had a discussion, and they're making it either 3 or 4 units, and it was a single family.
Again, just because I'm looking at the clock.
I understand, I'm just saying that's where the nervousness is coming
This is a body that doesn't deal with building permits. We
Right.
hear you.
My concern is that that's why we're worried, is that so much of it's going under the table, which, that's our concern.
We don't have a track record with that.
No, I'm not accusing you, I'm just saying, and I obviously, we were given incorrect information, because I confirmed it with the city before I even put a notice to respond to neighbors' concerns.
Okay.
I made sure I confirmed it, so that was misinformation.
I would just make sure that in the future, when you verify information, that you do it through,
I have it via email.
well, through whichever agency regulates that. So in this instance, that would be the zoning administrator's office, not CHAP, not planning, not other agencies. It would be, the zoning administrator would be able to say one way or the other, yes, this is true, that it can, that it reverts or not. But it's just, we've had that issue in the past where someone in city government of 17,000 employees.
It was actually CHAP and code enforcement, just so you know, because I was calling them about the other property.
Yeah.
So I verified it in the same conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And we are off the record.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.